Another example of solid organization, even in a small market, is what happened to the Corrs, who, and maybe we can talk about the importance or not breaking the US market. And I think they're a prime example of a very successful band who, relatively speaking, did not break the US market, but nevertheless became extremely successful on their own terms.
Yeah, the Corrs could be one of the most, I got to say, the most dangerous case studies in the book. Dangerous because I don't know if that position exists anymore in the current music industry. I'm not sure that a band that didn't break America would be tolerated by the major label system. And I think it's worthy of study for that reason alone, but also for other reasons. And you keep putting punk rock into some of these moments, which is a great way to insert something that we think we know something about, punk rock and DIY, and then the Corrs. You think, well, where does DIY or punk rock come into things? But the Corrs evolution absolutely gets a huge boost by Roddy Doyle, by the Commitments, by them going to the audition for the Commitments. And the Commitments film is made in Ireland because the book is about Ireland. And the Corrs don't exist before the auditions for music for that film. So would the Corrs have been discovered if Roddy Doyle hadn't written the Commitments and the film hadn't been made, especially if it hadn't been made in Ireland? I would argue there's a good chance that the Corrs may never have been heard of. And there's your punk rock moment in the Corrs, is that the publishing press that publishes Roddy Doyle and Fintan O'Toole and other brilliant authors is inspired by punk rock. And, someone in Finglas thought, okay, so there's bands that begin their bands in a garage in England, because, the Clash were famously singing about garage land. And thought, well, sure, I can do a book publishing company here in Finglas. And so it's really, really interesting when you trace the little tendrils of inspiration and enterprise that actually turn into very significant cultural exports, as well as pieces of culture that are very, very meaningful. So the Corrs should be seen in that context. And because of the way the Corrs looked, and because they were sold on their looks to a large extent, a lot of the promotion was based on the way they appeared. I think there was a genuine surprise when they turned out to be such consummate musicians. And from all of the evidence, they turned out to be really good, ordinary people who were enjoying getting an opportunity to play music. They weren't divas, they weren't untouchable, and they were happy to roll up their sleeves and to entertain people even when there were, technical failures, as happened famously in Australia, where the soundboard failed, and they said, well, sure, that doesn't matter to us. We're used to, we can play without that. And that really endeared them to people in Australia, which became a key market, because I think that it was assumed when they were signed into the Warner organization in New York that they'd be huge. And the money spent on them was the type of budget you would spend on a band that's going to be huge quickly. And if you don't see a return on that, the record labels get a little bit twitchy. And it's very, very interesting that the Corrs were able to find supporters in places like Australia, in places like Spain, continental Europe, before they were very, very big in the States. And I would argue that they're still not superstars in the States. And clearly Ireland, they broke big there. And then Britain was a huge, huge triumph. And they were one of the biggest selling artists of their era in Britain, even though they were signed to the US part of the label. And I mentioned the word dangerous with that case study. I hope that an Irish band or a band from any other country who didn't find instant success on a major label in the States, I hope that they would still be nurtured the way the Corrs were, with clearly the eventual huge financial success. But I don't think that a band would receive that sort of assistance from a major label.
Yeah.
And I think to get to the major label's attention in the first place, the DIY in Ireland, because the music industry in Ireland didn't acknowledge them. And it was through, famously through Bill Whelan brought like the American ambassador to come and see this band. And the record labels based in Dublin didn't even bother to go to the gig that had been organized for them to see the band. And then they got to play in Washington, and they got a bit of political, the Irish American lobby. They're not afraid of supporting Irish product that they think is cool or different or represents something to them. And then that bounced back to build up the story. But the Corrs are an example where the Irish music scene, the DIY, the help, the strange, ordinary things where you're not under contract, that really helped the Corrs. Whereas there's no evidence that the Irish music industry helped them until they actually had a record deal from an American label. So again, you're seeing that vacuum that exists where we don't have Irish record labels that support Irish bands and then export them successfully.